Could you first walk us through, like, you started at Graebel, you walked into what sounds like an implementation nightmare, like 8 months post go live and not a single account had been reconciled. Can you paint the picture of what you found on day one and what was actually causing the systems to fail so badly?
Yeah, long time ago now, and certainly we're in far better space today than we were back then. I remember, I'll take it back a couple of steps prior to that. I remember being in the interview process and just asking what had they done, how they got to where they got to. And I got the sense then, straight away in that interview process, that there was a lack of real understanding of how this system works, particularly with the cloud commitments that everyone signs up to with D365 and that whole evergreen approach. They
Yeah.
really didn't have any answers around that. So for me, straight away, I knew that I was dealing with a situation where I could bring in a lot of knowledge immediately. And that's how it proved. Coming in, I'm not going to try and say it was a low bar to scale over. There,
Yeah.
there were a lot of challenges. There were an awful lot of challenges. And when I came in December, they'd gone live. I came in December 2019. They went live on some point in April 2019. And it was very clear that there were significant issues around adoption and training and making sure that people knew what they were doing, that they were ready for it. That's what I saw straight away. And even just talking to people, it was very, very clear to me that they didn't know how the system worked. They didn't understand why why financial transactions created certain entries. They just didn't know that. There was a distinct lack of knowledge across the end user group, which causes a lot of these issues. Digging beneath that, there were further issues beneath that as well. My view of it at the time was, how did this go live? We were
Yeah.
already 8 months in. You weren't going to turn it off. It was live. It was just not operable.
Yeah.
The procedures were actually fine. It was the knowledge of the procedures and it was the understanding of the procedures and therefore the execution of the procedures that were a real problem. But beneath that, there were a bunch of other issues. So going back again, this was a business-led project. IT were not heavily involved in it. There was a lot of back and forth. I think they started out with the DAX 2012 implementation, and about 2 years in, they made the change to switch over to D365, but a lot of the development had been committed by then, and they ported it over to D365 without real remedial testing of, does the solution still work the same way? Because you're moving
Hmm.
from an on-premise base with
Yeah.
a completely different similar code structure, but more control over the code structure to something that you're not going to have a great deal of control over. So totally different makeup there. And I don't think they did enough real regression testing to say, does this still work the way that we intended to? Couple that with business pressures, costs were mounting, timeline kept extending. It just got into a situation where there was a very adversarial relationship with the vendor that was created through this process. There were leadership changes in our structure. So different people were trying to have a stab at it and understand, where are we at? How do we get this
Yeah.
live? And just pushing it through. And we ended up actually getting, you always hear like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Well, Graebel went live with a phase 0.5.
Point five.
But I've never heard of it before. But a Graebel 0.5, with a Graebel phase 0.5, which basically meant a bunch of functionality was left behind that should have been there as part of the initial go live. But such were the business pressures at the time, such was the length of time that had been taken to get to this point, they just had to get it live. And they dropped a bunch of functionality, put in a version that was, I say, it could go live, but it wasn't fully operable. And there were
Yeah.
definitely pieces missing at go live that would have been critical to what they needed. In terms of that as well, there was documentation issues. It was just like a complete mess. It really was. Once it went live, they were then in the situation of escalating tickets all over the place. Our
Yeah.
user base didn't know how to do things. So naturally, they were asking for support. I think that every day, my colleague told me every day it was like 100 tickets coming into a team of 2 people who just didn't have the bandwidth to go and deal with this. And you couple in there the adversarial relationship with the partner, how bad that relationship was at the time,
Yeah.
the fact that nothing was being reconciled, so there were no financial reports, payments weren't going out on time. It was a total mess.
Yeah.
Then you add in
Yeah.
things like, because there was such a drop in the actual functionality that went into the go live, clearly a bunch of business unit leaders were like, well, when are we going to get our processes? When are we going to get the developments that we were promised? Huge
Yeah.
development backlog. And then on top of all that, you've got a complete misunderstanding of how the system operates from a maintenance perspective. So
Yeah.
platform updates, and we all know the early platform updates were not as seamless
Hmm.
as they are today. So we did end up with a couple of platform updates that just went straight into production, no testing or very minimal testing, and breaking processes. So
Yeah. The ones that you did have.
yes. And I remember the first week I started at Graebel, they were doing a platform update, and I think it was either 10.0.6 or 10.0.8. It was that long ago.
Yeah.
And there was a bug in there around certain post and profiles affecting the GL postings. It just went in. It went in and it caused chaos. And we've
Oh
lived with
wow.
that for a couple of months while we waited for the next platform update. But that tells you that nobody was really looking at it correctly. No one was controlling it. There was no real product ownership or product stewardship. So confidence was low, really low when I came in.